Countdown, buddy. I told you about the countdown.
Oh yeah, see, you do see
As
that.
I
So
navigated
welcome.
the green room, I found out about the countdown.
The
Yeah.
countdown feels very official. Like it seems we're for real at this
Yeah,
moment.
we're for real. You are live on the interwebs right now. So
Very cool.
And I wonder, do you? Oh, now I have to compare screens. Do you see the little eyeball counter that I'd see, or no?
yeah,
Up by the okay.
I
Yeah.
do have a counter. I don't have an eyeball.
Okay. I guess that's just for me. So far, this many eyes are watching, but we usually get a couple,
Cool.
and it expands. So yeah, we don't necessarily. Do we need to introduce ourselves just yet, or we just wait till
this is the
we
green
actually?
room. This is
Yes,
the green room, buddy. Like we have a guest.
Yes. His
Did you
name is
welcome
Ben.
him?
No,
Yeah.
welcome Ben. Our,
Thank you, Kurt.
another one of our favorite architect friends from our days on the Young Architects Forum.
That was really an amazing group, wasn't it? We were so
Yeah, it was.
lucky to be together those couple years.
Yeah, we had a very, very, very good cohort. Yeah. So
Yeah, in this green room part of the phase, I'll admit that I've been on a lot of other committees for AIA since then, and none of them had the magic that we had on the YF. I feel like it was. I want more of that. I basically expected all my other committee work to be as equally rewarding and I don't know what the word is, valuable in the entertainment and learning experience. It was a lot of fun. It was fun to do the work for the volunteer work. It made
Yeah.
it fun.
That's a really good way of putting it.
And so,
We definitely had some of the magic on a couple other committees I've been on, but YAFA special
yeah,
for sure.
it's funny. We get to Amy and I get to do this reminiscing from time to time, and so I'm not crying. You're crying. It always feels strange to like. Some days, to think back, it feels like a long time ago and not a long time ago at the same time. I don't know if you feel that way too.
Yeah, it actually surprises me how long ago it was now, because it doesn't feel that long ago. Like, oh, we were just doing that a couple years ago, maybe, but it was.
It's like 10 years ago almost.
I don't know. I don't want to say it. I don't want to say it out loud.
Well, it's like it goes along with the milestones of like not being an EP anymore. When you emerge past
Yep.
that definition, 10-year definition, it's like, oh yeah, I technically don't belong here.
I learned that through this candidate campaign process, when we met, when all the candidates were meeting with YAF, their last question was, what should we rename Young Architects Forum? And I guess they're working on that now. And I sort of had mixed reactions to it, because I agree young is not the best descriptor of what being licensed 10 years or less is, because that doesn't necessarily translate to age. But at the same time, YAF has a cachet unlike any other. It has a brand,
Yeah.
Yep.
And so to undo that at this point also feels not like the right move. So that was interesting. I didn't have a good answer for them, because I was like conflicted in my own head about that idea of undoing.
Well, and I think that would be totally appropriate. I mean, like, you saw Curtin Eye's reaction when you said that. I mean, it was sort of the same thing. I mean,
and I'm sure they all saw my face. I was like,
yeah, like, are y'all crazy? Well, I mean, because it was funny you say that, and of course they're setting up a task force to study it. I have been on one of those crazy task force before, where and at that point I was kind of like, I'm actually kind of just I wanted to be in the room. Like I wanted to be in the task force, wanted to be in the room to kind of hear this discussion, because it was, I didn't even say what it was, because it was something that I had heard that conversation so many times before in other contexts. And this was AIA actually like convening like a task force to talk about it. And so I was on the nomenclature task force from AIA National when it was, so what do we call an intern when it's not an intern anymore? or you know, like when we can't use that term anymore. And it was like, yeah, it's a terrible term. Of course it is. And then it was, you know, this, you know, kind of bizarre brainstorming session where you've got, you know, 50 terms on the wall and, you know, all these adjectives that you're adding to it, and, you know, baggage with terms, and, you know, no, that's awful, and this and that and whatever. And it was really strange. And then you have this, and then you look around the room, like I was saying, like being in the room and seeing all the perspectives of folks from across the country at varying levels of their career, and literally everybody's having the same conversation, and, you know, or going, you know, back in my day, and it's like, and it's still like, you know, that whole, like the timeline, the continuum, you know, the regionality, I mean, the whole bit's like, yep, our profession is goofy. You know, it's like at the end of the day, you know, so.
Right. I wonder too, you know, like here, I'm sure in your own local chambers of commerce, they have a young professionals group.
Right.
Or something like that. And so the use of the word young, whether it's associated with age or not, kind of still feels like the same, or something that is appropriate enough for a demographic. Well, you can't, I guess it's, especially like the titling task force like Jamie was on, it's like, it's really hard to, you can't capture every single person in one title.
It's impossible.
Necessary. It's just more of like a, how
Well, yeah,
well,
'cause
like how much general broadcast can you get, you know?
Yeah, I mean, because at some point it's, you know, everybody's journey and everybody's story, you know, is, I mean, should be, you know, the most important. I mean, absolutely. I mean, I wouldn't disagree with that. But you can't capture everybody's story in a title or a term. I mean, that's, you know, that's just, you know, that's a fool's errand. I mean, that's just not going to happen. Now, you, of course, don't want to create something that's, you know, marginalizing or excluding folks or anything like that. And I think that those parts of the conversation for me when I was there, and it got me to Milwaukee, my first time in Milwaukee. So got to see some, you know, Calatrava, and it was, you know, some interesting sort of adaptive reuse. And so it was fun. Uh-oh. Kurt's messaging folks. So
there is somebody on Twitch watching, so just wanted to say welcome.
Hello, on Twitch. Welcome.
This is the green room. This is the show before the show. So I'd like to get that in there.
You know, I try and multitask the best.
Yeah.
I can.
This is the best part, where this is where the outtakes, you know,
some of the juiciest bits. Yes.
No, it's not. They're not juicy. They're just flubs.
Good content.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because there's a lack of formality, so you probably get.
Yeah, because we're gonna get super formal in a minute.
Yeah, I'm waiting for that part.
Nah. Well, maybe slightly more formal. In our own kind of way. You know, aside from, like, say, the shameless plugs like this one that we've used in the past. the shameless, come on. The show is called Coffee Sketch Podcast. We always photograph your pens. Why not? I got one here too. Let's show everyone show and tell.
Yeah.
Oh,
see, there you go. Yeah. There you go.
We should hold them all up. Hold up. Let's hold them all up one more time there. This would be a good screenshot for a shameless tweet.
Did you do that?
Did I do what?
You screenshot that.
Oh, I'll get it off the recording. I have that kind of
Post rationalized screenshot is what he's saying.
Okay, I like to do the live screenshot, so I'm gonna.
So we're doing that again. Is that what
So you
you're
can
saying?
make me do it again? Okay, that's good. Jamie's got. He needs 3 hands now.
Got it.
That was good content right there.
We're gonna compare screenshots.
Those
We're
are the best teasers yet. Everyone's like, "What? What are they doing?" Goofy.
Yeah. Oh, let me pull that down because we don't want to overplay our hand there. So I don't know about you guys, but are you guys ready to go live? You feel like
You feeling ready, Ben? Are you ready for the show?
Audience into the show?
Okay.
Show. All right. I gotta do a couple of clicks, so I'll see you guys in approximately 30 seconds. Click. Welcome. So normally I would just say, "Hey, Jamie," but last time we had a guest, he teased me, and so I'll say, "Hey, Ben, how are you doing?"
Hey, Kurt. Hey, Jamie. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, likewise.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to chat with you.
Welcome to episode 119 of the Coffee Sketch Podcast, season 5 in effect, live streaming as well. So this is exciting stuff.
Yeah,
pretty cool. And I don't mean it as a joke. That's actually really cool. You guys have done this 118 times already. It's awesome.
Thanks.
Yes. Yeah, when we had Evelyn on recently, and she, from the promo clip, she was asking about that photo of Kurt and I, and saying we looked really young, which we appreciated. But then at the same time, we were like, oh yeah, we're getting old. Yeah, but that photo, ironically, was were purposefully included, I should say, because that's New York 2018, when Kurt and I came up with the idea, or I should say, Kurt came up with the idea and pitched it to me of the Coffee Sketch Podcast.
And you didn't say no.
And I didn't say no. Right? Haven't said no. Haven't said no for a couple of years now. So
it wasn't. As they say, it takes 2 to tango, or 2 to podcast. Maybe, I don't know.
I don't know if that's true about podcasting, but I like the sentiment. 2 is better as a podcast. I'll give you that.
Yeah. Yes. Well, that was, and I think that was sort of the reasoning behind Kurt going, "I need a co-host, please."
Here's a crazy idea. I think what was it wasn't at that picture that the thought came to mind, but I think it was in our tiniest little hotel room that we shared for the conference at
New York, right?
Yeah, New York, in this tiny hotel room.
That is the smallest one I think we've been in. Yeah.
It was I think it was bunk beds. It was that small.
Yeah, we had bunk beds.
I think it was a hostel, technically. A hostel. HOSTEL, not the other hostel. But it was something at like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning when all the pizza, sold by slice pizza shops were closed, and I was on fumes, and I said, there was this idea I had. Luckily, it was, so as per usual, it was well presented by Kurt and well prepared. I just threw it out there, and Jamie agreed. But yeah, it still strikes me how it's been 5 years of doing this, and it's still fun, of course. Otherwise, we wouldn't do it. And Yeah,
and it gives us a chance to bring in people that we've gotten to know through kind of the journey of this too. So, we were talking with you a little bit in the green room about our Young Architects Forum cohort and the beauty of that group. And so, Ben, just for everybody who's listening, can you do kind of a quick who you are and maybe like subtly hint about West Coast, East Coast, because I think we'll talk about that here in a minute.
Yeah, thanks. My name is Ben Caston, and I'm an architect, and I live in Washington, D.C. right now, but I sort of still feel like a Californian. So I grew up in California. I lived in California. I worked in California for the first 15 years of my career, and I was serving as the Young Architect Regional Director for Southern California on the Young Architects Forum when I met you two back in 2014.
Yeah.
Which is 9 years ago, which is amazing because it sort of feels like I just met you guys, because it doesn't feel like that long ago, but at the same time, I can't really remember not knowing you, so that's kind of cool too. Like when I think about it. Yeah, and so
we're familiar like that. We're just familiar like that.
Yeah. And there was something really special about our group, and Young Architects Forum in general is kind of an amazing amalgamation of architects from all across the country. And some of my favorite moments with that group is when we would be in some city, either for grassroots or the conference or whatever, and we would all take an Uber ride or a taxi together, and the driver would be like, "Where are you from?" And we all have a date that we're staying, and it like blows the driver's mind every time. Like, how are you?
How do you all know each other? Yeah.
From Michigan and Austin and Southern California in the back of my car together. Like, why are you together? Like, how do you fit? And I think that's really cool how that group brings us all together. But yeah, so I served in AIA Orange County and then AIA California. I had the pleasure of being the president of AIA California, which was an amazing experience unto itself. And right on the heels of that, my firm asked me if I'd move across country, and I didn't say no. So I live in Washington, D.C. I work for this firm called KTGY. We do housing, and I co-lead a studio, and we do multifamily housing of all population types and all densities. And it's funny because I was trying to get involved in AIDC and not having an easy time of it. Now, if you think about the timing, a lot of that was during the pandemic, so it wasn't easy to get connected with anyone that you didn't already know. But somehow some of my friends who were on the national board, like Britt Lindbergh and Nate Hudson, said, "Well, you should just run for a national board position. There's no one running in that category anyway." And now there's 5 people in this category. Full circle. Now the AIA DC people know who I am, so it's probably a lot easier to get plugged in. So it's a really weird way to get connected to your local chapter to run for a national board position. I wouldn't recommend it necessarily, but it proved to be effective for me so far.
So how do you like so I did my undergraduate at USC in LA, and so and now I live in Michigan, and so but I'm not native to either. I'm from Connecticut, right? So Connecticut, California, and now Michigan, and I spent with school I was in LA for 12 years, and so I was before we got into the formal part of the episode, I was curious because you and I hadn't. I don't think we had a chance, because of the pandemic, to kind of because in your case, the firm brought you over. But for you, as a native of California, which there usually aren't too many true natives, born and raised.
Yeah, a lot of imports.
And like myself for a brief period of time. But
And
no, I was just curious.
Me too.
Oh, true. I forget. Sorry, Jamie. We're gonna be going back to near your old stomping grounds in the conference this year.
Yeah.
Jamie's a northern Californian.
Bay Area.
Parts.
Yeah, that's right.
By way of Montreal.
Well, did you start there?
Pardon?
Didn't you start there in Montreal?
So born in Montreal, and then came to the States and lived in Atlanta for a hot minute, and then quickly went out. Yeah, in Hotlanta for a hot minute, and then went.
Everything's hot.
Yeah, everything's hot. And then went to the West Coast, which was amazing. And I think my folks still kind of lament, like, that house that we it was the first house we thought we maybe should just keep, as the company moves us around the country. And I think for both of them that would have been the perfect retirement home. Perfect climate, perfect. They just would have loved it. And it was a neat area, neat place to live, and for me to grow up there, at least initially, before we moved around some more. I loved it.
But so Ben, now you're a transplant to DC. How do you, aside from, I hope there's some continuity, like we talked about, familiarity, from the company side.
Yeah.
But then, how do you like DC? It's definitely different than Southern California.
Yeah.
In some aspects, the density maybe not so much.
I honestly love DC. I love living here. It's an amazing city. I mean, it's one of the greatest cities in the world, really, and all the things that you want to check on the boxes of your community, DC has almost all of them, if not all of them, and is continually looking for ways to improve itself too. So it's been fun to be a resident of the district and kind of participate in trying to make it better, even in the short 3-4 years that I've been here. But a lot of people, it's almost trendy to like move out of California right now for whatever number of reasons. And I wasn't one of those in our family. I mean, we love California. Like, we still kind of consider ourselves Californians. And
right.
We didn't move for like this like statement. Like a lot of people I do know do that. And this wasn't the plan. And that's maybe part of the beauty of it too. Like, I would have expected we would just like be Californians. And it all happened really, really, really fast. So, our CEO reached out to, it was actually my wife works for K2GY also. So she runs the research and development studio. And so the CEO and kind of the managing principal of the office that we were working on in Southern California reached out to us and said, hey, would you consider this in like mid-October? And by the second week of November, we were committed to going. It wasn't on the radar even a little bit. So, but you don't have many chances to really just shake the Etch-a-Sketch and start over.
Well, no, I mean, and I think as a kid, for me, like, that was what you guys just experienced as parents is what my parents did.
Yeah.
And so I love hearing it. It's like, this is sort of, I love hearing it from your perspective related to architecture now. Because I mean, even to this day, it's like, I mean, I'm in a conversation literally yesterday, and somebody is introducing me to somebody, and like, oh, this is, Jamie, architect, blah, 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 blah. And and they see my Aggie ring, so they're like, oh, you went to A&M, da da da. So there's that whole Texas thing going on, and then I can tell as I'm talking to them, they don't pick up an accent. They're kind of trying to place me. Yeah, and then I somehow it gets into the conversation that I was born in Canada, and they're just like,
you could be born in Canada.
Yeah. So yeah. You're an immigrant.
Immigrants are allowed here.
Yeah, right. You better watch out.
At that point, I do not tell them. I don't mention to them that I lived a lot of time in California, so because that would just probably really hurt.
That helps your case there.
Yeah, really hurt their brains quite a bit. But I appreciate you sort of kind of recognizing that and sort of sharing that, is that for y'all to think about that for your family and for your careers. I think that's I from talking to my dad even now about some of those moves that they made, they weren't always planned. I mean, there was trajectories in the company that he was aware of, and then some that he was not.
Yeah.
And some of them are like, hey, we're going to move that group to this. We're thinking about moving it to this part of the country or recentering our efforts over here. Who do we want to have kind of in that group? And, are they in the right place? And, well, and suddenly you're moving from, the Bay Area to Nashville, it's like what? So
Before it was cool.
yeah, way before it was cool. It's way cooler now. So, yeah, tell a like a preteen or like teenager, like, hey, you're living in the Bay Area and now we're going to go to Nashville. It's like Tennessee. Not
If
sure.
you told that today, it'd be cool.
Yeah, today everybody would be totally fine, right?
Well, yeah, you got Jack White, right? Settled in Nashville, right?
Are you trying to get a baseball reference in there? Or is that what you're trying to do? Is this another? Are you doing another subreddit with Jack White?
Jack White, White Stripes.
He makes. Oh, here we go. See, we're getting into it was going to happen. It was going to happen
to make this happen.
So Jack White has a baseball bat company. He makes baseball bats. Yes.
He's a huge fan.
He is.
Oh, I was thinking of the music set, making records and all that.
Yeah,
stuff.
That too.
Yeah, he's a big baseball. Well, he's from Detroit,
right?
Cast Tech original, and I wouldn't say original, but a native of Detroit. Actual Detroit, not the suburbs.
So Ben, you've officially crossed from the Coffee Sketch podcast into the subreddit like baseball podcast that Kurt and I occasionally have like a very short piece of our episodes.
I'm here for it. I like it.
Yeah. Oh, I know you're totally here for it. So I know that. So baseball is officially your favorite sport, right?
Oh yeah, I love baseball so much.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I passed that love of baseball to my older son. He loves baseball perhaps more than me, which is saying something. He knows all the things about all the things in baseball. And then my younger son doesn't like baseball. And it's honestly a little bit refreshing that he discovered that he doesn't love it, and he's got something, and that's okay too.
Yeah, no, that's cool. That's very cool. So before we forget, since this is the Coffee Sketch podcast, so we do talk about the coffee. And so Ben, what is the coffee du jour for you?
So my favorite coffee is from this place called Blue Bottle, which is California, from the Bay Area coffee. And we have a couple in DC. One that used to be walkable to where our apartment was in Georgetown, which is likely not a coincidence. But at home we are a little bit sticklers to Italian coffee, so we either drink Lavazza or Illy. But I'm a sucker for Blue Bottle so much. I love it. I like them. Not only is their coffee amazing, but they find themselves in interesting architectural spaces. They definitely have a tenet of their brand that is connected to architecture. And so when you find a Blue Bottle, it's usually in a interesting building, often a world-class building. So like in downtown LA, they're in the Bradbury building. In New York City, they're in Rockefeller Center. And
Smart.
There's lots of examples of this. They gravitate towards good buildings, and they hire good firms to do their interior spaces, and
appreciate architecture.
It's a brand that resonates with me and my family really well.
No, that's awesome. You just gave Kurt and I like a whole rabbit hole to go down when we're in San Francisco soon. So
and they're originally from Oakland, and I was working on a project And I was collaborating with designers. I was still living in Southern California, but they needed help, and so I was collaborating with designers in Oakland. And so I'd fly up. We had every other week meetings, and we would walk to the site, and we'd walk from the KGY office in Jack London, and we walk by the original Blue Bottle where they did their roasting at the time, and to the site. It was like halfway between, and we like get coffee on the way, and we get coffee on the way back. It was awesome.
Couldn't be better.
I know, it was like a dream. I didn't even know how good I had it at the time.
So, Jamie, why don't you go next? Because I think I have a visual aid that might be a good segue into some of our photos, sketches.
Oh,
so you go next.
So I'm trying. I tried a different one. I mentioned that I picked one up that I would talk about. It's called Stumptown.
Yeah.
And so like for some reason like they were like in a blind spot for me or something. And so I'd never had them before. And I am like very impressed. And then got on their website and was like went down like a whole rabbit hole. So I've really, really enjoyed. So I've got their Homestead roast.
That's all.
I would not be surprised that Portlandia be not good at coffee. So yeah. So
Pacific Northwest coffee is awesome.
Yeah. So last week, Jamie and I on our episode talked about well, we often talk about, I'm going to put my other shameless plug up down below, but locally here there's a group of guys in Flint called Rootless Coffee, and I've done a little work for them, not solicited or I wasn't begging to like, please let me do work for you guys. It just so happened to work out that they needed a permit to get their a new roaster into their space. But anyway, so the fun part about Rootless, they're a relatively young company, and I think they roast some great coffee. And I probably will have to gift you some for being on our show.
Oh,
Jamie's had some.
Oh yeah.
And so so he's familiar. Now I need to follow up on my guests' gifts. So,
I mean, that's awesome. And if I'm not mistaken, maybe you were just joking, but are they seriously going to name a roast after you guys in this podcast?
Oh, we're in the negotiations.
Yeah, we're in the negotiations phase. Yes.
I'm a very slow negotiator.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're working on a interesting collaboration thanks for the Coffee Sketch podcast. But which kind of a good segue. So I brought the bag of what I'm drinking on right now.
Nice.
Which is called Out of Your Element, which if you're familiar with The Big Lebowski, you see.
Yeah. That's cool.
See our bowling friends there, but I think, like I said, sweet and balanced with a creamy body, notes of milk, chocolate, and citrus. And so, why I thought this would be a fun segue is that every flavor that they have, the bag has a label that was designed by a different artist. So every bag has a completely different artist that does the artwork, and then they, it's like a sticker that they put on the bag, so it has this sort of guerrilla tactic to it. Yeah. And it's just kind of neat, and I think it's neat. The artwork is excellent, each one that they do. So
do they use a different artist every time, or they're kind of repeat? Do you know?
I think, let me check. I think it's different. Yeah, this is a different name. I think each one has a different artist attached with a different style. And so
the vibes are a little bit different between each. It's subtle, but yeah.
Yeah,
Kurt has to get his consumption up before we increase those negotiations. So like it's like one of those.
I think I'm almost single-handedly making max profit for these.
Right.
But yeah, so we'll find a nice guest gift full of some rootless coffee for you, Ben. So
I cannot wait.
yeah.
That's very nice of you.
The yeah. So the segue. Let me turn on the sketches. Let me share our sketches. Is we wanted to tap into a little piece of Ben's personal passion, right? A fan of Shepard Fairey, right? The artist that is known for his Obey artwork, the Andre the Giant artwork, which Jamie is donning his
Wow,
T-shirt
that's an
of.
amazing plug. That's cool.
We try our best at theming here. So what at least I'll start because I know Ben unfortunately never got a chance to see this one in person
Not
when
yet.
well, unfortunately
Oh, is it gone?
it's gone now because this is the Quicken Loans building
Yeah.
downtown Detroit. So it's right in the heart of downtown. You could see down at the bottom the monorail, also known as the People Mover. Um, this lot to the right is actually being built right now. This is the old Hudson's department store site, which Shop Architects out of New York has designed like a tall hotel and retail or commercial thing at the bottom. Anyway, but that's not the main event. This mural here on the backside of the Quicken building was a Shepard Fairey commission, and you can see if I zoom in even farther, you can kind of see the hints of the Obey logo in there. But yeah, unfortunately, they actually built out the rest of this like the courtyard space. So now there's no wall. The wall is gone. It's kind of sad, but I guess square footage. I think it was all done. It might have been done by the time we had that grassroots conference because I mean during the pandemic, I doubt they needed more square footage in commercial retail or not retail, commercial office. But yeah, unfortunately, sorry to report that it's now gone. But it's kind of a neat piece of history, I suppose, for us.
There's an interesting temporal nature to his work, and he almost embraces the fact that they only live for so long. And I know he just traded out a mural in New York for a new one of his own, but that's part of it, and that's maybe one of the things I want to talk to you guys about is the themes that are in his work are universal, but his work itself sometimes only lives for a short time before it's either replaced or covered up or tagged or something, and he almost doesn't care about that. And the other side of that too is that he finds sort of like leftover pieces of architecture. Often it's rare when a new building would be designed around his piece or any piece really, and I think that's maybe a lost opportunity or missed opportunity. This is a photo from one of his murals in Seattle, and I liked this little vantage point because he started out with those kind of DIY stickers and like paste ups, like what you're seeing in the foreground. But now he's getting commissioned. I think that's a hotel in the background, kind of like through the filter of the fence and whatever. And it's 6 stories tall or whatever. But there's a little bit of a continuity there and a before and after. But I would love to collaborate with an artist like him, and there's many other muralists that I love too. But it seems like they come in afterwards most of the time.
Well, and I think that's part of the tenet or the core of their process is that it's the collaboration part, I think, is something that they would appreciate. I think it's at some certain level, but I think it's sort of what you're alluding to is I think that there's a tenet of reaction,
Yeah.
and timeliness and sort of the guerrilla tactic of it all too. I mean, I'm sure that you've looked at it too, but it's the Andre the Giant kind of moniker, and image that sort of started his real kind of upward trajectory, was a school project, and effectively was something that was an experiment, that kind of grew into something obviously much more, and taking that and turning it into a brand. I think is that to me is that moment as an artist, architect, creator is the one that I'm still searching for, myself. That level of confidence where you say, "Hey, I've got this amazing idea," and people are reacting to it, and you're like, "Oh, I'm not really sure, but I love it," and the process is there. But then that sort of that moment, finding that moment, that switch where you say, I think I can do a little bit more. And I think that that would be hard to capture if you were planning it all out ahead of time. And I think that that's the thing about our career, in architecture, is there is so much planning to it, just inherently in the construction process. I mean, you have to. That the art, kind of, and this kind of art, is something that I think runs counter to that. So those two, though the processes might look similar when you're in them, from the structural aspect of it, I think that they run counter to one another.
It makes a lot of sense.
It's a procedure, right? The difference between procedure and process, or
well,
or structure, I suppose. Like
well,
said.
and it's interesting to me now. I mean, and I don't know why it just sort of hit me, but and sort of even seeing it like this. I mean, like, I love well, I like aerosol art.
I do too. It's art. I love it.
Yeah, and I understand how to make a stencil. So I might have made a stencil in my life. But I think what's interesting now is I'm in a position where some of my consulting work is I'm talking to people about balancing, sort of circling back to your initial kind of proposition, Ben, about working with a muralist, as an architect, is I work with a lot of communities where they're thinking about public art, and they're in some cases commissioning architects to do projects, or individual businesses are within their confines or districts or whatever, and there's a need and an interest for public art, and kind of curating that to some extent. And what's interesting is that push and pull of regulation of it. Like people appreciate public art, but then at the same time, how can you regulate it or encourage it, develop it, and not hamstring the artists themselves,
And actually, but before Ben, sorry to jump in, I want to kind of segue over, and we'll come back to this particular image. But as we were talking, or you two were talking, I grabbed a couple of images here to throw into the mix, because we were talking about architecture, our buildings, and public art and mural and things like that. Here in Flint is the Flint Public Art Project has been doing this mural project for it's been a while. I don't even know long. It's been at least 3 or 4 years, and hundreds of buildings in Flint. Yeah, there you go. I sent Jamie a sort of a memorial spray
cool.
can.
So
they
cool.
bring in artists from all over the world, and they've coordinated all these fantastic murals. And one of my favorites is literally right downtown Flint. on the front of the loft bar, and it was recent. It was a relative recent after Bourdain's passing,
Mm-hmm.
and the level of detail in many of these murals is like just mind blowing pieces of art. And I remember when this was getting painted, and I found out that the artist that did this one in particular, this was her first full scale mural,
Oh wow,
and she it was like
nailed it.
it's like amazing.
Yeah,
It's
nailed
like
it.
yeah, right. It's like, and she has now a couple other around town. Um,
I
but
love these like public art projects. I know in Southern California, Long Beach has one. There's one in DC too. I didn't mean to interrupt you, Kurt. Though, keep going.
oh, that's no thanks. No, and I mean, I just screen grabbed like a little Google image search for the Flint murals, but one aspect of these here in Flint, and it's this idea of like, how do we treat public space, or how does our public realm impact day-to-day life, right? And for many of these buildings, they're abandoned or underutilized,
Hmm.
through a lot of circumstances here in Flint. And these murals, the concept of this mural project was to kind of showcase the artists, have relatively available canvas for them to work on. But for me as an architect, I kind of look at these as a sort of the temporality that we talked about, but like as a stepping stone toward casting a positive light back on these empty buildings, which once were very vibrant parts of our commercial and residential community in Flint, but are in a sort of transitional phase, and
Mm-hmm.
hopefully bring back this idea that they're not uh, lost, like a lost cause, and there's a chance for architecture and in these these existing buildings to have life. And Jamie and I have talked about, we haven't talked about this so much, and I've never really brought a image into the podcast, but we have talked about what he does now with the historical commission, and sketching and imagining how to, and as he just mentioned, right, like talking with communities and how to regulate or create some sort of structure around these public arts. So anyway, it's very interesting. If you ever make it to Michigan, you come visit me up here in Flint, Ben. I could take you. There's, I think, at least 300 murals now. It's
Oh
like
wow,
it's an insane number that
that's
they've
awesome.
grown
There's
to. So
there's a hope that's built into this that is inspiring, and also um, there's a freedom in mural painting, and this is definitely a part of Shepard Fairey's work as well about political activism and much the way Blue Bottle's brand and their values kind of resonate with me. Shepard Fairey's values do the same, and it's about social justice and equity and preserving the planet and all these things that are kind of near and true to pretty most architects, if not all. Um, and he's and other muralists are able to like bring that meaning so fluidly into their work. It's harder to do that as architecture, and in
yeah,
some ways, the opposite perspective is easier to express architecturally. The sort of like hierarchical, um, the power to the power that is
Yeah,
easier to
yeah,
be expressed architecturally than the opposite. You know what I mean?
yeah. I mean, I think that's we have a sketch that we just literally talked about, that um, I thought, well, now we have Ben on, maybe we should talk to him about it too. But I did a sketch in May or late May, maybe first week of June of 2020,
Yeah.
and um, and it was, you know, wrapping the octagon in DC, and it's sort of you know, just exactly what you're talking about is that, you know, there are these big ideas, there's these big struggles, there's these big concepts that are, you know, kind of universal discussions, and how, you know, how can you have the immediacy of a moment, you know, manifest itself? Well, it's certainly not going to manifest itself in a building because it takes too long. But can it manifest itself in art, and, you know, and be a commentary to a certain degree too? And I think that the thing, you know, the thing that I appreciate about artists like Shepard Fairey and Christo and you know, people who are purposely putting their art in a very, very public space. You know, I mean, and some of it's ego and ambition too. I mean, you can't do what you do if you don't have a little bit of that. But to move the needle on the conversation, and not be afraid, you know, you know, I mean, there's a recognition. There's a lot of people who are going to disagree with you. You know, I mean, but you still do it anyways. And, you know, that's, you know, because at your core, your beliefs, you know, push you to do it. You know, that's art, you know, that's brand, you know, that's oftentimes the difference between architecture and art. That, you know, for myself, I find myself that way too. It's like, well, you know, it's maybe in an architecture point of view, it's like, well, maybe you're not our client. You know, kind of situation. But, you know, but I think that there's not just the temporal nature of it, but I think it's just sort of the faster process of it. You know, that I think that appeals, and maybe that's the appeal as an architect too, is to kind of have that as like a counterpoint. But I don't know if you'd seen this sketch before. So
I remember when you did this. It's awesome. But yeah, I mean, the speed of concept to reality as a visual artist is a different timeline, let's just say, than concept to reality for a building.
Yeah, well, I mean, and you know, 2 years prior to this, I'd never seen Christo's work in person. You know, never had been to any of his, you know, public art projects, but it was really, really, and of course they take I mean, you say, you know, they're fast. The art is fast, like the visual art is fast. We all, you know, appreciate that, but the installation, you know, now you're talking almost like a building again. So, you know, there's that planning and timing and coordination, collaboration, and, you know, you bringing in larger teams to execute larger things. Even the murals of like Shepard Fairey, I mean, you know, he's having to bring in larger teams of folks. But yeah, in 18, that summer, Em and I went to London and got to see his mastaba, kind of the oil barrels. And, you know, again, you know, talking about the environment, you know, talking about climate action. You know, that was a project in his case, you know, Christo and Jean-Claude, I mean, I think they had been planning that project in more than one location. And it eventually ended up in Hyde Park in London, but like for decades, you know, I mean, there was drawings that went back, you know, decades, you know, that he had used to fundraise for the project and sort of get people's kind of, you know, eyes and ears and thoughts kind of centered around it, which is also kind of akin to architecture, right? I mean, we have those early concept sketches where you're trying to convince somebody to do the right thing on a project or a building, or to kind of grapple with the idea that you as an architect are, you know, proposing. There's quite a lot of process similarities, even if there are, you know, quite a few differences too.
Yeah, totally right. And that's so neat that you were able to see that piece in real life.
Oh yeah, I mean, just the sheer scale of it was just like, it was it was it was dumb big. I mean, it was just. I mean,
You can't feel that from the photos. You got to
no,
Right.
no, no, and I think the other part of it too was, it was sort of the beautiful juxtaposition of this public art piece in this historic garden, this historic park in the center of London, on the water, with the swans going by, and it's about oil and energy and consumption, and that moment when you're, for me, sitting there, drinking a coffee, and and M's being very patient with Dad, so I can, sketch for a moment. But it was a beautiful day. I mean, we had a lot of fun. But yeah, I mean, you recognize, you're like, this is really strange. This is like, it's a beautiful piece, but this is really surreal, and I think the innate power of that is exciting, or it was, at least for me. So, yeah. Paddle boats. I mean, come on.
Right. I thought this one of all the. I was just trying to grab it in, throw the image in, but yeah, this is interesting. The what Jamie mentioned about scale in real life versus the concept sketch phase or the presentation phase. But I mean, we often, I've been teaching at university, and so trying to teach young students, future architects, how to think about proportion and scale and sight and context, and lately, right, the soup du jour is um, like an Instagrammable image rendering, right? They like to match what they see, and so their renderings tend to have this very hyper focused detail on and sort of missing some of the bigger picture. And so trying to understand, it's been interesting for me to try and express like the idea of scale and context, like like this image is reminding us, and if you get to be there, what is it like in person versus just the photograph, as you said, Ben. So yeah, it is like a bucket list thing for me. Well, I don't know if there will be many more Cristo installations because we lost Cristo, right? So
I guess some could come back potentially. I mean, the drawings exist, and
right,
sometimes you can see that, but
yep.
Yeah, I've lost that moment. But there's something to wanting to create a space that someone cares about enough, or feels enough in, that they make a Instagram post or story about it. Like there's a value in that, but it's sort of like, I see it like the intent of like lead certification, for example. Like some of our clients think that the lead certification is the goal, and that's not the goal. That's like a side benefit. Like the point is to make a building that performs better, that has a better experience for the users, and like the certification, okay, that's nice, but and like I would say the same for the goal is to create these amazing spaces for the experience of the people that are there. And yeah, if they care enough about it to put it on their Instagram, like that's cool too. But sometimes we get like backwards in our thinking.
Well, and I was sort of curious, just because the scale of your firm and the studio that you're in, and then also the types of projects that you're doing. I mean, they're bigger buildings, and from a process standpoint, I mean, Kurt and I have been having this sort of running thread. I mean, and I think it's just part of the education model, but also sort of the way that we both, tend to, it resonates with us. But process to us is almost product.
Yeah.
And I'm curious how that feeling, would be applicable to where you are, both from a studio point of view, but also from the types of work that you do.
Yeah. It operates on a couple different levels, honestly. And, I work on a studio. There's about 40 of us, and I'm on the front end. So our designers I think there's 9 or 10 of us now. And yeah, we're providing housing. And there's a nobility in that, which is cool, but there's also an economic piece of it that makes it really difficult. There's just this downward pressure towards cost on everything that we do, but at the same time, our clients are some of the most profitable corporations in the country right now, especially the last couple of years. And there's this weird dichotomy. Plus, we're in this housing shortage. So the way we approach it is like we're the advocates for the users who don't have a voice, who won't have a voice for literally years. And our favorite clients, or maybe just the ones that are the easiest to work with, see the value in our perspective of trying to advocate for them. And the ones that we don't get along with the most are the opposite, that don't care and don't see that, some of these moves that we can make or decisions that we can edge towards a better choice than a less good choice. The ones that don't care are the ones that we don't quite get along with. But both in the studio itself, though, oftentimes it's just about creating an environment that's fun to create in. And I work really hard on trying to keep everyone that I work with inspired and encouraged and kind of just moving, because we spend a lot of time together. And so the buildings that we're creating are part of it, and obviously the main part, but there's another part too, and it's just the joy in our daily lives and what we do every day. And we do some funny things, like we write haikus about every project that we do. And we literally use it as a verbal diagram to try to center our choices. And if we point back to this haiku, it helps us to figure out what are the priorities. And so it's kind of an interesting contrast in a lot of different ways. It's about the building, but it's also about doing the design work. It's about the user, but it also has to get built. And
yeah,
we don't help the user at all if we can't design something that our clients can actually construct.
Right. Yeah. I assume you also work on affordable housing, not just market rate.
Yeah, honestly, my favorite projects are often affordable. There's a power in the constraints of it. If you know where the edges are, and we do a lot of tax credit affordable housing, and so we can use the constraints of trying to score well in the tax credit applications to compel our clients to make a lot of really good choices. And so the resultant is our affordable work is often my favorite.
It's a way to convince the client that it was really their idea to begin with. And you use all the mechanisms at your power and disposal, which include, here's this pro forma that's coming out of the tax credit, process. And it's leading us to this design solution. How do y'all feel about that?
Yeah. And even better, there are some of our clients that it is their idea, and then they know it, and they're like, all right, here's what we got to do. What do you got? Let's
that's even better.
The limit on this. Here's my vision. Where can you take it? And those are my favorite.
Have you? Just before we leave that though, Kurt, I just wanted to ask Ben. I hadn't thought about it that way until you brought up the affordable housing tax credits and that process. Um, have you done any historic tax credit projects? Where your capital stack is you're actually layering, one and the other on top of it and doing adaptive reuse or rehabilitation projects.
So we're working on one right now. Now it's not affordable, but it is. We're kind of bringing a historic resource back into life. Like, so it was originally a bowling alley, um, but there was a fire in like the 1950s, and it's been just like an office building since then. And so we're going to turn that into the amenity space for this new residential community. And so we're going to put two apartment buildings on either side, and then the middle is this historic building that becomes kind of the connector. Um, and so we haven't crossed over on historic plus affordable, but we've done it separately. So now I'm intrigued. So maybe we can find
Well,
a way to add that in too. Yeah, that's cool.
Well, and it's interesting because it's like I myself haven't done the affordable either. I there was a project or two that in a previous firm that we were looking at some affordable housing tax credits, and I was just starting to understand that process a little bit. But it's not, multifamily was never my forte. And it's not necessarily where a lot of my work ever was. We did a little bit of it from time to time. Always practiced as a generalist, so it was you're sort of learning a lot of things along the way. But I have, in my focus on historic tax credits, and how those projects kind of occur, have encountered quite a few that are trying to utilize both, and certain development groups are are getting really shrewd about how to make a an existing building that is made everybody kind of scratch their head for a really long time. How do we get this thing back online and make the dollars work? They find a way to utilize both tax credit systems, and I we have a project now in the office that someone has sort of brought that back to our attention, and so I've been trying to read a little bit more about it myself.
Well, and the only thing I was going to add that here in Flint, I've went off on my own a couple of years ago, and I've got a variety of different project types. And luckily, because I equally enjoy multifamily and as much as you do, Ben, and I'm working with a local Flint nonprofit developer on some affordable housing, and this one aspect of what I'm about to say could probably turn into a whole other episode about perception of affordable housing.
It's our part 2 with Ben Kasdan. So.
Yeah, the return.
I can't wait.
But it's anyway, it's a complicated. We're working on some, well, yeah, that tax credit structure. I'm not necessarily involved in that much. It's just more understanding of the pace, the hurry up and wait
Oh yeah.
aspect. Working with the contractor and the developer and moving through all the hoops and hurdles and things. But here in Michigan, we're using in order, like one example of gaining credits is using higher levels of uh, energy efficiency in
Yep.
buildings. So one pathway is the National Green Building uh, Standard, I guess, the NGBS,
Yep.
and so one of some of the pushback you get on affordable housing is that it's cheaply built and for poor people, and so you build it as cheaply and terribly as possible. I'm working on, well, one's in construction and two more are going to go into construction, and I can guarantee that these buildings are not cheap. They're not cheaply constructed, and they're way more energy efficient than the sort of existing conditions of one and two family houses of the people that are kind of, you know, poo-pooing the typology. And unfortunately, it's hard. It's very difficult to like sort of turn certain minds. But when it comes to construction method and means, the client, the contractor, and we're in order to receive the credits, you have to meet certain thresholds.
Yeah.
So it's in a value engineering exercise, if we use a piece of jargon, certain measures don't get taken out of the project because you want them to be there in order to gain the credits, plus also provide a more a higher level of amenity to the user, like you were saying. So that part of all the work, right, all the headache and hurdles and hoops that the government, state, and local put you through to get through to these permits and so on is still worth it once you realize how well, how good of a home you're creating for somebody, a new apartment in my case. So anyway, so I was trying to keep that from turning down negative town,
Yeah.
and the NIMBY stuff. But we could definitely that could go into a whole other, that's the
We could talk
can of
another
worms.
hour about that. I think you were very thoughtful in how you describe that condition, and I totally agree with you.
Well, and I think what's neat is and this might be a maybe we bring Ben back on, and then and we also invite Ilya because I think the third leg of this chair or table, is it a chair or is it a table in that analogy?
Stool.
I don't know. Stool. Damn it!
It's kind of a like table like chair.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Ben, picking me
More
back
proper.
up. No, so it's that affordable aspect, which is also sort of an equity aspect of things,
Yeah.
and then the historic resources is really both about community culture and telling a story in my mind. But then the last part then is that whole climate action, and if as architects, and as architects who advocate, we can't, and then and who educate. I mean, whether informally or formally, we can't not be doing our work without thinking about a climate response. I mean, and whether it's like you said, Ben, a means to an end where a client understands a lead criteria and and it's more formalized, or it's just sort of informing our design decisions and processes. That's the reality of our work. I mean, the greenest building is the one that's already there. And I mean, Carl said that, and everybody uses his quote, and and that's super important. But I think what it is to me is it goes so much more beyond that, and that's why it's sort of I'm passionate about it, is because as a sort of a disruptor type, kind of artist architect, is that the greenest building is the one that's already there, and we're not using enough of them, and we need to. And we need to educate people on how to approach that and see the value in it, and convince clients to see the value in it, or communities. And if the communities say, yeah, we see the value in it, but our regulations don't allow it, well, then maybe we need to look at the regulations. Maybe the code isn't catching up, or whatever parameter it is, because at some point it's a design problem. I mean, and it's not just the joke about architects thinking that they can design their way out of everything, but in some respects, what we're talking about, it is, there's a reality to that. I mean, it's true.
And going back to Kurt's Flint art project, the artists are picking up on these buildings as blank canvases, and we need to look at it as blank canvases for future redevelopment, for bringing back vitality to our cities and all those things.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Maybe, yeah, it might, with my infinite amounts of free time, I might try and take AI and Flint and try and spin off on what the art project has done, and it'd be fun to maybe have a design. I mean, we default sometimes to do design competitions, but how do you sort of raise awareness of the building, the programmatic aspect of the building, but then coupled with this art?
Yeah.
I think there's a power in that. So fascinating. There's so much. It's been so much fun to catch up with you, Ben. It's
Yeah,
like we
likewise.
haven't had a pandemic since the last time we talked.
I know. Yeah, we could probably talk for ever, maybe.
Yeah,
this is-
well, I know we've hit about an hour, maybe a little over, so we can head to the wrap up. The I guess before I flub the outro, when we talked with Evelyn, so she asked us if we were going to be in San Francisco. So are you planning on going to the conference this year?
Oh yeah, yeah. I'll see
Oh,
you
good.
guys there.
We are also going to be there with some remote recording devices.
Oh, very
yeah,
cool.
Try and
yeah,
pull
we
this
are
off on the road.
we are doing full guerrilla coffee sketch, and you are welcome to join us.
Oh,
So.
that would be a joy. I look forward to that. And it'll be great to be in the same place at the same time as you guys. It's been a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds cool.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you. It's been really fun to catch up, and I can't wait to talk more, whether it's on the podcast or just in real life.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, guys.